It's been a while again since I've talked about a DuckTales episode, not because I don't want to talk about DuckTales, I still really like the series, but because with time being limited as it is, in an era where I was reviewing 2 first-run shows at once every week, sometimes things had to be pushed back, and, well, DuckTales, regardless of how much I like it, it's one that fits within a happy medium of being one that a lot of people have already seen, and also one that's older. So I felt like I could stand to push it back, where I couldn't with other stuff. It's also nothing near my flagship series or anything, right? But the one good thing to come from Amphibia being done is that I now have more time for other stuff again. So we're talking about DuckTales today. We're talking about, what's the title of this one actually? From the confidential case files of Agent 22, which is, Agent 22 is Beakley. Oh, and I'm glad I looked over here when I did, because my computer is opening a bunch of stuff that it shouldn't be. That's weird. And on one hand, this is an episode giving us flashbacks to how Scrooge and Beakley met and teamed up and became the duo that they are now. But it's also a story about how Scrooge comes to appreciate someone who's already in his life more than he ever did before. We're talking about Webby here, and it's in part because Beakley herself didn't want Webby to get too wrapped up in Scrooge's business, because she's worried for her granddaughter. But part of it's just that Scrooge tends to mind his own business unless somebody really butts into it hard enough. And couple that with the fact that Beakley holding Webby back made it seem like Webby didn't want to become involved in his business. He just never really thought about it much. And you could tell he regrets that super hard throughout this episode. And it's actually very cool seeing him open up to this kid who cares about him so much and almost idolizes him. Like, we find out in this one that, like we already kind of knew this, but we see it directly impact events. Webby is so interested in Scrooge and his adventurous family, and Scrooge himself in particular in this episode. She knows all the old stories of Beakley and Scrooge effectively being secret agents together, which, is this the first time that we, the audience, had actually heard about this? Like, if we heard about it before, it was only kind of in passing, because I don't remember it at all. And yet Webby talks about it like it's just common knowledge. The plot of this specific episode being that while the boys are having a TV night, and Beakley's actually being quite gentle with them, it's actually quite cute. She's still being Beakley about stuff, but she's very kind and gentle with them. You can tell she's actually good with kids. She heads into the kitchen and is confronted by a cloaked assassin, which leads to a very intense fight. Like, it was crazy how back and forth and intense this struggle was. It's one of the better, more visceral fights in the show, because it didn't have any of the over-the-top antics you usually see in this show and other shows like it. It felt like a fight that you would see in like a more serious spy show or something. And Beakley only really loses because she's surprised by the revelation that this person is someone she knows, an old enemy called Black Heron, one of the agents of Fowl, her agent being Shush, and they're framed very much like the agencies from like a Bond film or something. Arch nemesis counterpart agencies, whereas one is the clear good guy and one is the clear bad guy, and they do over-the-top stuff to try to accomplish their goals. Very tropey, but it worked because, being as tropey as it was, it assumed that we knew those tropes, and then it could just plow ahead with the story. And thankfully, the following morning, Scrooge is able to recognize what happened and realize what's going on, and go on a mission to get her back. A mission that Webby joins, even though Scrooge insists that this isn't the kind of mission that a kid should be on. Like, he even at one point says, this isn't like the adventures he usually goes on. This is significantly more serious. And it was an interesting contrast because it paints the clear picture that the kinds of still pretty dangerous missions that he usually takes the boys and or Webby on, those are the kinds of things that he only takes them with him because he knows he can handle them. But in situations where he's not so sure, he's more responsible about it. And I liked that. I liked that for his character. And through the use of intercutting flashbacks, we see these parallel events happening between Scrooge and Beakley and Scrooge and Webby, where Scrooge was brought in by Shush for his adventuring knowledge and for his money, it seems also, but we'll talk about that in a second. And Beakley to him was very much what Scrooge is to Webby, at least at the start of this journey. But it's not so clear-cut. There's not such an obvious parallel. Because Webby, being someone who has studied Beakley's case files on all of her old Agent 22 cases, still knows at least as much about how to deal with some of these problems as Scrooge does. And Scrooge, being someone who, even in the flashbacks even call this out, is the kind of person who trusts himself enough and trusts his instincts and his experience enough that he's willing to just assume that he's going to wing it a certain amount of the time on one of these adventures. Webby's more prepared than that. And so there are some obstacles, like getting over a watery pit with a bunch of dead piranhas in it. Webby came prepared with a grappling hook, whereas Scrooge had to wade through. And there's a robot minion on the island where this villain has set up her lair, where she's keeping Beakley, the same island that she set up her lair on the first time around, that gets in their way this time, that wouldn't have if Scrooge had been more worried about dealing with it the first time around. The consequences of that mission directly affect their situation now. Their specific mission is to try to keep Black Heron from retrieving a page from an old druid book that she plans to attempt to acquire at auction, which contains a formula given to them by people from the forest that will allow them to create super soldiers of some kind, with Black Heron's mission being to create an army of super soldiers that will allow her to achieve world domination. Of course. And this is where Scrooge's money comes in. It's clear that he was intended to use it to bid beyond what Shush had given him, but he's too stingy, and that leads to everything that comes next. And she's come for Beakley now because she's finally set her operation up again, but she doesn't know the formula. But she knows Beakley would, because Shush agents are supposed to memorize everything to do with their cases. Everything, regardless of how detrimental it would be to do so. Because Beakley is the one who rips up the page containing the original formula. Why would she then also memorize it? That's just goofy. And in the end, she's able to use Webby, the fact that Webby is there, as leverage to get Beakley to give her the formula. And she makes the formula, but Scrooge, being that by the seat of his pants, a wing-it kind of guy, sees an opportunity, and so there's this conversation he had with Webby on the way up here where he realizes he doesn't know anything about her, and so she starts telling him all of her favorite things, and he's able to reference that to get across to her that he wants her to drink the formula and use the super soldier powers that it gives her for a limited time, I would assume. I assume she's not going to have this power forever, to become all bouncy and use it to get them out of the situation they're in. Which parallels how Beakley beat her back the first time, except back then it was Beakley taking Scrooge's advice and fighting by the seat of her pants, but here it's Scrooge combining that mentality with actually having a plan, finding a balance. It's really cool. And they even managed to repel Black Heron, and though it seems that she might have escaped, she's down one robotic arm, so that's at least good. And for better or worse, these three characters are closer now, but there's also some of the formula. It still exists. Webby has it with her. So I imagine this is going to come up again at some point. And it's really cute. Like, Scrooge tells Webby to call him Uncle Scrooge. It seems like they've grown into more of a family unit now. And I liked it a lot. There are also some really funny moments in this one. I'll point out one. Like when they find the destruction in the kitchen at first. Webby suggests that maybe it was Donald trying to make an omelet again or something to that effect. Which is funny in and of itself. Like, that would have been a chuckle-worthy joke in and of itself. But then Scrooge is like, no, he still hasn't figured out how to get out of the pantry. And we cut to the pantry, with Donald trying to punch his way through the door and screaming, and it was perfect. It was the perfect 1-2 punch of comedy, and it was quick and snappy, and out of nowhere in the midst of a serious situation. That didn't really hurt the tone because it was there and gone again so quick. It's a perfect example of the kind of comedy that this show does well. And the other thing that this show does well is references to other Disney properties that coexisted with the original DuckTales. Like the people from the forest that gave the formula to the druids were the gummy bears from the old Gummy Bears cartoon. Like, Black Heron even references their theme song at one point. And if I'm not mistaken, the formula, the super soldier formula that makes you bouncy, is literally just gummy berry juice right down to how it's made. Like, I watched that show when I was a kid. Not a lot, but I watched it fairly often. And I know it's pretty popular. I know that there are people who like it. And yet that is a reference that I never expected this show would make. It was just so good. In fact, I enjoyed this episode quite a lot. I think this is one of my favorite episodes of the show. It's top 5 at least. So far, anyway. And Black Heron as a villain was super interesting. Having this Bond villain style character in the show is extremely interesting. Considering the tone that this show usually goes for, I think it works perfectly. And assuming that we are going to see her again, I look forward to seeing her again. I think that'll be a lot of fun. All of that said, though, guys, what did you think of From the Confidential Case Files of Agent 22? If you have seen it, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. This will be in the video description, but either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.